So one thing I do welcome you to do is go into your folders, pull out the case study if you haven't reviewed it yet, start taking a look at that. We're going to talk a little bit about how we're going to set this up, and then you're going to get some practice coding here. So just as we start with all of our presentations, our list of acronyms, and again, that list is provided in your folder. Okay, for today, this session, the case study, our hope is that you can apply knowledge acquired during the 2 days training to accurately code clinical scenarios within a patient case study. And let's start going over that case study. So meet Mrs. S. She is a 70-year-old female admitted to an acute care hospital on November 3rd with a right thigh and hip pain following a fall. Upon hospital admission, she's noted to have a right proximal femoral fracture and large ecchymosis on the right hip. Her past medical history includes hypertension, congestive heart failure, and depression. So, Mrs. S. underwent surgery on November 4th for a total hip arthroplasty to repair her right femoral fracture. Her postoperative status was stable. However, she progressed with inpatient physical therapy. Her progress with inpatient physical therapy was slow. She was discharged home on November 8th with a referral to home care for nursing, occupational, and physical therapy services. So to set this up, we are going to have, that's just a synopsis of the case study. Obviously, you see the one that's in your folder with all the details. What I'd like to do is we decided to make this very much like our home health world, where you have a starter care nurse, wave your hand, starter care nurse, right there. And then I'll be the discharge nurse doing the discharge assessment. So in alignment with that, I'd like to have this half of the room over here to do the starter care scenarios, or the starter care coding, and then we'll have this half of the room do the discharge, with the idea that, and we'll talk a little bit about what those elements contain, but the idea is that you get to do starter care or discharge. And like I mentioned, the documents that are in your folder include the starter care, discharge, OASIS items, the home health QRP, training case study, and then the coding sheet to match up with those OASIS items. And we're actually going to give you about 30 minutes, maybe 35, depending on how everything goes. For the starter care assessment items, the ones we're specifically looking for you to code with would be M1060, the height and weight, your GG0100, prior functioning everyday activities, your GG110, prior device use, your GG0130, self-care, and your GG0170, mobility. For my discharge nurses and therapists out there, you're going to be doing GG0130, self-care, GG0170, mobility, J1800, any falls since sock rock, and J1900, number of falls since sock rock. Okay, so I'm inviting you guys to work in groups at your tables. Again, the information is in your packet, and right now we're going to take a little break and we'll reconvene. I think the time I have down is around 2:15. So I'll let you guys work and we'll just meander around to see how you guys are doing.
First of all, I just want to do a quick poll. The side of the room that was working on start of care and discharge goal, were you able to finish? Okay, and did you have time enough to start on the discharge side? No. That's why we split the room in half. How about the discharge side? How did you do? Were you able to finish the discharge? Okay, and did you have time to go back and start on the start of care and discharge goal? Some of you did. Okay, that's the reason why, because it's a complex case study, we felt that it was best to divide the room in half, and then we can all learn from each other. On account of, that's one of the things that home health providers do best, right? That's right. Okay, so as we go through the start of care assessment, again, we don't have a lot of time, and I'm committed to getting you out on time. So we're going to go through this fairly quickly. Start of care assessment, the first item we're going to look at is M1060, the height and weight. And in this, from the case study, you will have entered 62 for height and a dash for the weight. The rationale being that Mrs. S was able to have her height measured in the bed at 5 feet 2 inches, which equates to 62 inches. However, she is unable to stand on a scale. There is no previous agency-obtained weight within the preceding 30 days, therefore, no information is available, so we are using a dash here. Let's move on to GG0100, the prior functioning in everyday activities. Here, we are looking at the section to the right, using the key on the left. A, self-care, would be a 3. And the rationale here is that Mrs. S was independent with self-care activities prior to the hip fracture. In indoor mobility, again, she was a 3. Prior to the fracture, she walked on indoor surfaces with her rollator walker independently. C, stairs. Here we have to code her as a 2, needing some help. The reason being that Mrs. S required standby assistance from her son to climb the stairs to the second level of her home prior to the hip fracture. Finally, D, functional cognition, we are scoring our patient Mrs. S as a number 2, needing some help, with the rationale being that Mrs. S needed some assistance in grocery shopping, paying the bills, and med management from her son prior to the incident. Now let's move on to GG0110, prior device use. Remember that in prior device use, we are looking to identify what devices and aids this patient was using prior to the onset of the illness or injury. Here, you're going to check the ones that apply: manual wheelchair and a walker. There we go. It's stubborn today. The reason we've checked both of these is because Mrs. S required both the rollator walker for ambulation and a manual wheelchair for longer distance. Moving on to GG0130, self-care. This is a lengthy section, so let's try not to get confused, and I'll try not to trip over my words. Here we want to look at how the items laid out on the page. The left column is your sock rock performance. The right column, number 2, is discharge goal. So here we are documenting your sock rock assessment and putting next to it for each item the discharge goal. A is eating. The answer we have put here is that on sock rock, we are scoring her as an 05, and we have established that the discharge goal will be 06. Our rationale for this is that on start of care, Mrs. S could feed herself, but she did need assistance from her son for setup. On discharge, it's anticipated that Mrs. S will be able to set the table, prepare her own meals, and clean up afterward without assistance. For B, oral hygiene, we are scoring her 05 on start of care, and we're also putting in 06 again for our discharge goal. Rationale here is that Mrs. S could brush her teeth without assistance after her son brought a tray with the setup on it. At discharge, we do believe that Mrs. S will no longer need assistance with her oral hygiene. Toileting hygiene. Here we are scoring her as 03 on admission, and again we are anticipating 06 that she will be independent by discharge. Our rationale here is that in the case study, you will have seen that the nurse has documented that Mrs. S required trunk support for peri-hygiene. The RN then proceeded to provide standby while Mrs. S readjusted her clothing. Our discharge goal is that Mrs. S will return to full independence when she is ready for discharge. In shower bathing, in E, we are again assigning an O2 this time to her start of care performance and an O4 for discharge. I have here as the rationale, if you go back and look in the case study, you will find that Mrs. S on start of care reports she is only able to bathe her chest, arms, and anterior thighs. Her son performed the rest of her bathing and dried her, providing then more than half of the effort. I think we need to canonize this boy. For the for the discharge goal, the rationale would be that the patient will be able to bathe and dry herself completely with a standby assistance from her son. Moving on to upper body dressing, here we have O5 for start of care and O6 independent for discharge goal. Our rationale is, again, that once undergarments and blouse are brought to her, the patient is able to complete this dressing activity. But on discharge, she will be able to obtain the items and dress herself completely. For the lower body dressing, we have O2 for start of care and O6 for the discharge goal. We believe that and have seen that due to fatigue and balance issues, Mrs. S required her son to provide significant help to dress her lower body. The son contributes more effort than Mrs. S, greater than half, to complete this activity. Discharge goal here is again independent. She could before, and it is believed that on discharge she will again be able to dress independently. Moving to H, putting on and taking off footwear. Here the start of care performance is again an O2, and the discharge goal is O6. The rationale here is that Mrs. S required her son to contribute more than half of the effort to put on her shoes and socks. The son placed the shoes in front of her, put on her socks, and Mrs. S slid her feet into her slip-on shoes. By discharge, however, our rationale is that Mrs. S will be able to put on and take off her socks and shoes independently. Let's move on to GG0170, mobility. So we are looking here at the start of care performance and discharge goal. For the first one, roll left and right. For this, on start of care, our assessment is O2. Our discharge goal is O6. The rationale being that the nurse had to position the pillow between her legs, and she had to provide the majority of the effort for the roll side to side. On discharge, it is anticipated Mrs. S will be independent. For sit to lying, we are again O2 on start of care and O6 on discharge. Although Mrs. S provided some of the effort using her right arm to lower herself, the nurse did again provide more than half of the effort by lifting Mrs. S's legs and supporting her trunk. On discharge, it's anticipated Mrs. S will be independent with her bed mobility. For lying to sitting on the side of the bed, again, O2 on start of care, but here, for the discharge goal, we really believe it will still be O4. The rationale here is that on start of care, she required substantial assistance. She required assistance to bring the right leg off the bed and to be fully supported by the nurse to sit. On discharge, she should be able to move from lying to sitting, but with standby assistance. Sit to stand. Our start of care assessment remains O2. Here, the discharge assessment is now O6 for independent. Our rationale here is that she is still requiring substantial or maximal assistance from someone to support most of her weight moving to a standing position, but by discharge, she should once again be able to be independent as she was prior to the injury. In E, bed to chair transfer. At start of care, O2, here for discharge, the goal returns to O4. The rationale here is that on start of care, she is requiring maximal assistance to accomplish this task. She needed the helper to position her walker, both prior to and during the transfer, along with verbal cueing. That's a considerable amount of assistance, which clearly is only at the O2 level. For the discharge goal, we still believe that she's going to need ongoing supervision or touch assistance in order to safely accomplish this. F, toilet transfer, O2, and here O6. Again, on start of care, substantial maximal assistance. She required the nurse to stabilize her trunk in order for her to safely come to the standing position and complete the transfer. But by discharge, she should once again be independent. Looking at car transfer, here we have scored our start of care as a 10 and our discharge as an 04. The rationale for this is that the car was not available during the 5-day assessment window. Therefore, we scored this as 10, and we were unable to do this for environmental limitations. This is, again, one of the newer codes, and it certainly is a helpful one to be able to use. Discharge goal here is 04. It is believed that Mrs. S will return to this level and be able to make this transfer with contact guard and her rollator walker. As I said, this particular item is long. I, walking 10 feet. We have here that on start of care, she is an 03. On discharge, we believe she will return to independence. During the assessment, Mrs. S walked 7 feet with the rollator walker and a steady from her son, but she became fatigued and needed partial assistance with her son holding her belt in order to complete the last 3 feet. The use of the assistive device, the rollator walker, does not affect the coding. The question is, how much assistance did she need? The discharge goal, again, is independent because we believe she'll return to being able to walk the 10 feet as she did prior. J is walking 50 feet with 2 turns, and let me tell you, they can be tricky. She is scored 88 here in start of care and 04 on discharge. Rationale, 88 because the activity was not done due to fatigue, and 04 for discharge because we are basing this on her prior status and her being very motivated to improve. K is to walk 150 feet. We have scored this 09 in both areas as not applicable because she couldn't do this before her injury. L, walking 10 feet on uneven surfaces, 88 for the start of care, and 04 for the discharge, the same as J. And the rationale is the same. This activity was not attempted due to her fatigue and her decreased endurance on admission because it simply wouldn't be safe. The discharge goal is decided on based on her prior mobility status. M, the one-step curb, is an 88 on admission and 04 on discharge. Again, the rationale is that attempting it was not appropriate due to her condition and the issue of safety, and it is believed that, as in prior to the injury, she will return to supervision or touch assist contact guard to go up and down the one step. In N4 steps, this is here left blank on start of care and 04 for the discharge. This is skipped, not attempted, because she was unable to go up or down one step We simply don't go there for the 4-step one. But we do think she can do this with contact guard on discharge. O, the 12 steps, is treated the same as N, not attempted for safety reasons, and she couldn't do the first one at 1 step or the 4 steps, so therefore we assume for her discharge she will again return to contact guard assist for the 12 steps. Picking up an object, P, 88 for the first for start of care assessment, and discharge goal is an 05. This is because we had safety concerns during the start of care, so we opted not to do this. But on discharge, with therapy, it's anticipated Mrs. S will complete the activity from a bending position with her adaptive equipment, such as a reacher. Note that here we have Q, the question of a device. And so here you answer yes, because she does have a wheelchair for that she has used. In 50 feet with 2 turns in the wheelchair, 02 on start of care and 06 on discharge. We know that in her chair, she on admission could only go 20 feet, whereas prior to the injury, she was able to go 50 feet in her manual chair and make her 2 turns. This again is asking us what type of wheelchair, so we indicate 1 for a manual. It was not an electric chair. S, wheel 150 feet. For here, we are indicating that it's an 02 on admission and an 02 on discharge. Because Mrs. S became so fatigued and her son had to move her the remaining distance, this is clearly more than half. We also know that prior to her injury, she could only self-propel 70 feet. She will always require a helper for 150 feet. And again, we indicate here that it was a manual wheelchair. And I'm going to turn this over to Charlotte, who's going to take us through the discharge assessment. She's very demanding. She wants a clicker.
Okay, so how'd you guys do so far, okay? Okay, we're almost there. So we're gonna get into GG0130, self-care. And we're gonna start with A, eating. And the code that was most appropriate was 06. And this is because Mrs. S could set the table and prepare her own meals, and she could eat and drink without assistance. Looking at B, oral hygiene, we got 06. And again, because Mrs. S could brush her teeth without assistance. For C, toilet hygiene, we got 06. Mrs. S performed her perineal hygiene without assistance. And again, this is looking at the discharge. For E, shower bathe self, again, we got 06. Mrs. S could independently bathe herself while seated on a shower chair. F, upper body dressing. And we got 06. Mrs. S could dress her upper body without assistance. For G, lower body dressing, we got 06, and that's because Mrs. S could dress her lower body without assistance. And then wrapping up that self-care item, we're looking at H, putting on and taking off footwear, and we got 06, as Mrs. S could put on and take off her socks and shoes independently with the use of adaptive equipment. Moving on to GG0170, mobility. And again, this is just the discharge performance as we are coding this at discharge. We're going to start with A, roll left and right. And the answer was 06. Mrs. S was independent with rolling to left and right and onto her back. Looking at GG0170B, lying to sitting, looks like we skipped one there, sorry. We got 06. There's a lot of 06s. And then the rationale behind that is that Mrs. S could roll side to side onto her back without any assistance. Looking at C, lying to sitting on the side of the bed, we got 06. And Mrs. S could move from a supine to sitting position without any assistance. Looking at D, sit to stand, we got 06. Miss S could stand from a sitting position without any assistance. Once standing, she used her rollator walker to steady herself. For E, chair, bed to chair transfer, we got 06. And as Mrs. S completed the chair, bed to chair transfer independently with the use of her rolling walker. For F, toilet transfer, we got 06, as Mrs. S could get on and off the bathroom toilet independently using a raised toilet seat. And then looking at G, car transfers, this one we got 04. Mrs. S could complete the car transfer with contact guard assistance and the use of her rollator walker. Okay, we're almost halfway done with this. So I walk 10 feet. We got 06. Mrs. S could walk 10 feet using a rolling walker without assistance. On J, walk 50 feet with 2 turns. We got 04. Yay. Mrs. S could walk 50 feet and make 2 turns using a rollator walker and contact guard assistance. And again, the use of the assistive device to complete the activity is not going to affect the coding. For M, wait, where am I? Oh, K, sorry. K, walk 150 feet. It's easy to get yourself lost here. 09, nice. It's good when you get it right. And the rationale behind that is this activity was not attempted, right? Mrs. S was not walking 150 feet prior to her current injury. And again, guys, this is using those non-attempted codes and understanding the differences between like 88, 09, all of that. That's really important, understanding what that prior ability is. Okay, so looking at L, walking 10 feet on uneven surfaces. 04, good, good. And the rationale, she could walk 10 feet on uneven surfaces with contact guard assistance using her rollator walker. Now let's look at those steps, right? We have M 1 step, N 4 steps, O 12 steps, right? So we got 04, 04, 04, good, 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 good. And again, Mrs. S required contact guard assistance to complete the 1 step, 4 step, and 1 flight of stairs. Okay, picking up an object, we got 05. 05, yes. Mrs. S could independently retrieve an object by bending from a standing position once adaptive equipment was set up. Okay. Let's look at Q. Does the patient use a wheelchair or a scooter? Oop, there we go. And the answer is 1, yes, good. She used a manual wheelchair. Looking at R, wheel 50 feet with 2 turns. We got 06, good, good. And again, Mrs. S wheeled herself 50 feet and completed 2 turns without any assistance. Okay, and we'll look at RR3, the type of wheelchair and or scooter used. 1, yes, and again, Mrs. S used that manual wheelchair, right? What about wheeling 150 feet? So actually 02 would be the correct answer. Mrs. S could wheel herself 60 feet, which is nearly her prior level of function. A helper was needed to propel her manual wheelchair the remaining 90 feet. The helper contributed more than half of the effort to complete this activity. No, but no, it's a matter of, she actually was able to complete she did participate in the activity, so you wouldn't use the non-attempted code in this, okay? That's the difference. I know it's a little bit of a nuance, but you have to think about, did you attempt the activity? If you attempted the activity, then it would not be a non-attempted code. And then finally, SS3, indicate the type of wheelchair. And again, we're going to go to the manual wheelchair because that's what she was using. Okay, so for J1800, any falls since Sock Rock? This looks pretty familiar. I hear answers coming out as yes, she did exactly have a fall. During the care episode when she attempted to climb the stairs without assistance. Does that ever happen in real life? Yeah, sometimes, right? Okay, and what about J1900, the number of falls since Sock Rock? So remember, we're coding how many boxes? 3 boxes, right, good. Okay, so let's take a look. For no injury, we've got 0, 1, 0, good. And the rationale is that Mrs. S did sustain a fall on November 26th that resulted in a bruise and abrasion, which we would call injury except major, right? And she had no other falls. Okay. So with that, I think we're going to be moving forward with a, let's see here. A question and answer wrap-up session here. So I am going to turn this over